seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Come along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Come along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news, talking this and that.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is 3 o'clock. My name is Dan Stewart, and I'm so grateful that you're here for our webinar today. Now, we are going to cover a lot of stuff. We're going to cover it at lightning pace. And before we do that, I have a confession. It's not 3 o'clock. It's 5:37 p.m. And I forgot to press record during the webinar earlier today, so now I get to pay the price by doing what I promised and being able to send you the recording just as soon as possible. So we had a great presentation earlier. Hundreds and hundreds of people showed up. We had over 20 people that showed up a half an hour early, and we had a real nice chat before we dove into the content. So a few things here, and then we're going to get started. First, I want you to know that if you're watching this recording, you are one of the first people on the planet to learn the title of my new book. We have not released this anywhere yet. This webinar is the very first place that we're doing it. So the book, as you might guess, since I'm kind of a happy guy, and well, I started a company named Happy Grasshopper, and I started the webinar with Pharrell singing Happy. The book has happy in the title. It is called Seriously Happy, and it is a salesperson's guide from contacts to contracts. Now, I do have to say this book would not be possible without my life story. It just wouldn't be. I'm going to get a little bit personal here. I'm going to share some things that have allowed this book to be able to be created. And my hope is that no matter where you are in your life, no matter what you've experienced, you'll understand that it really is possible to leave the past in the past and create the kind of future that you want for yourself. I can say that when I was a kid, imagining a life for myself that included happiness, that included things like a marriage that will be celebrating its 22nd year this year, like having 3 beautiful kids, like starting multiple businesses and having the privilege of employing so many people. None of these things were in my vision for what my life could become when I was a kid. They absolutely were not. You see, I grew up in a home, like far too many people, where our parents were not bad people necessarily. They were just people with issues. Both of mine drank too much, and so there were days when we would come home from school and mom might be passed out on the floor. There were days when there would be a parent-teacher conference and I would wait after school for mom to show up and she would never make it. And they would call and then some teacher would have to give me a ride home. There were all sorts of interruptions in my childhood because our parents kept us moving constantly. Like a lot of kids, I was the professional new kid. We moved 14 times before I left my parents' home. And I want you to think about that, 14 moves. If you break that down over a 12-year education, that's more than 1 move per school year. Now, we didn't move every year on exactly the same time frame. Some years we would stay in some moves we would stay in one place for years. Other times we'd be there just a few months. So in stretches of my childhood, I got the opportunity to observe people for long periods of time. So think about this, right? I'm talking about the mid to late 1970s and the early 1980s. We were not living in the age of distraction at that point in time. We did not all have a device glued to us 24/7, right? We did not all have the world clamoring for every moment of our attention. And so as children, we had the time to focus on things. We had that luxury of time that so many of us today, so many of our children may never get to experience. So as a new kid, I got the opportunity to observe how other kids behaved, and I started to see patterns develop. I started to recognize this certain kid in a certain class as being very similar to another kid that I may have known in a place we lived previously. And of course, it wasn't the same kid. It was just a kid exhibiting the same sorts of behavior. And I became fascinated by this. I really wanted to understand what makes someone likable. You know, what allows people, some people, to have so many friends. Everywhere they go, they make friends. I like to joke around that my father-in-law, Dave, well, you could push him out of an airplane, and I swear he'd make 100 friends before he reached the ground. He's just that guy. What is it about some people that make them so likable? Well, these are all things that I cover in the very first chapter of my book. And as I start to explain this, I want you to recognize that what I'm really doing is paying forward this massive sense of gratitude that I have for the people in my life who cared enough to teach me that I could be more than the environment that I was raised in. So this is my labor of love to share this with you, and I'm truly honored that you're watching this recording and that you're paying attention to what it is that I've been thinking about for so many years. So let's dive in. Let's start to discuss rapport, right? Rapport is something that I think is fairly well defined. Most of the people on this webinar and watching this recording will be professional salespeople. You have been taught many, many times that the first step of the sales process is building rapport, right? And if you read the definition here, it says rapport is a close and harmonious relationship in which the people or groups concerned understand each other's feelings or ideas and communicate well. Right, so that's sort of the textbook definition. What most people turn that into in the sales world is nice fish. You may know the sportscaster Jim Rome. He tells a story on air, I've heard him several times, talk about being a sales rep and going into the office and you see the guy's got a big fish on the wall, so the first thing out of your mouth is, oh wow, what a nice fish. And if that's you, I get it, right? You've been told you've got to find some common ground. You want to soften up the conversation a little bit before you get down to business. It's a cultural expectation. Now, what I'd like you to consider is that when you walk into this office and you see that fish on the wall, you're not the only person who's seen that fish, right? Do you think this guy has heard it 100 times before? Do you think that's the thing that every single person who comes into his office mentions? It is, obviously. So I want you to go in a different direction. I want you to glance around and see something else you can bring up. You know, you've got to find a way, and I call this discovering the dimple, right? We do this a lot in the content that we create at Happy Grasshopper. We look for a way to cover a story from a different perspective so that it becomes very conversation starting. So just glancing at this room, well, I mean, take a look right here. Here's a picture. That arch looks familiar to a lot of people who've done some traveling. That's in Cabo, right? So maybe that's where you go instead of commenting on the fish. Maybe you simply say, hey, is that Cabo? I thought I recognized that arch. Wow, that's a gorgeous picture. Is that where you caught the fish? Right? It's the same topic. You're just coming at it from a different perspective. So let's be really clear here right from the start. I do not want you to go out into the world and be a nice fish rapport builder. I want you, from this day forward, to recognize and to understand that building rapport is one of the most important things that we do as human beings. We are doing far more than simply giving ourselves the opportunity to sell something. We are creating the opportunity for us to become closer together, to build relationships. And those relationships, and I'll tell stories about this later, the relationship is always far more valuable than the sales opportunity. It always is. You may get one sale if that's all you're focused on, whereas if you have a relationship, you can get hundreds of sales. Are we clear? I think we are. All right, so those of you who attended during the live session, there was lots of interaction here, and I asked people to call things out in the question chat box, and of course you viewing this in the recording, you don't have the luxury of doing that. If you have questions to me, remember, I'm a real guy. Just email me, dan@happygrasshopper.com, and I will engage. It will really be me, and we'll get your questions answered. So let's go a little deeper on this topic of rapport. Right now, take a look at the screen here, and you'll see kind of the stereotypical sales approach. There are a number of techniques that are supposed to be beneficial in building rapport, such as matching your body language, posture, gesture, etc., maintaining eye contact, and matching breathing rhythm. So consider this, right? Millions of salespeople have been taught that. So when you meet someone for the first time and you go, oh, well, gosh, they're really loud and they talk really fast. Well, I'll be really loud and I'll talk really fast. You know, how much sense does that make for you as a person? If you're not the kind of person who would do that, right? If you don't happen to be that 1 in a million chameleon who really can summon all those different facets of your personality, you're starting your relationship with a lie. That's what you're doing. You're literally pretending to be someone you're not because of the false promise that by doing so, this guy is going to love you and trust you and decide immediately to want to do business with you. That's not the way it actually works. See, rapport is a much, much more valuable thing than that. You know, let's go a little deeper in the paragraph. Consider for a moment that if you were a psychotherapist, and Milton Erickson wrote about this in his book, or Jay Haley wrote about Milton Erickson doing this in his book, Uncommon Therapy. Psychiatrists have got to build rapport and trust if talk therapy is going to have a chance of success, right? The patient must trust the doctor. So, you know what? That's what we're doing when we're building rapport. We're establishing that solid foundation of trust. And unless you're doing that honestly, representing who you really are, how can you possibly have a really positive outcome? I don't believe that it is. So unlike a lot of people, I'm not going to suggest that you become a chameleon. I'm going to suggest that that's a horrible mistake. I'm going to suggest that you step back and you get truly comfortable with who you are and what your strengths are, because you are a person of merit. You are a person who matters. Of all the millions of people in the world, you're someone who's caring enough time to learn about this, presumably because you want to do the right thing with it. So that's my focus here. Now, as we go a little deeper into the subject of rapport, I've got to teach you a little bit about psychology. So let's talk about some things that drive all of us. These are the 6 human needs. Now, the first human need that we all share is the need for certainty. We like to know what our place is in the world, right? We like to know what time we're expected to be somewhere. We like to know that when we expect people to be there at a certain time, more than likely they will be, right? If the store says they'll be open from this hour to that hour, we expect it to be when we get there, right? We need that level of certainty in our lives. And yet at the same time, we also crave variety. We don't want to just repeat the same loop over and over and over. We like to have a little variety tossed in the mix. And Starbucks is actually a great example of this. If we evaluate how a company can fulfill some of these human needs, Starbucks provides a great example. Anywhere in the world that you go to Starbucks, you can walk in and get your order, you know, whatever your order might be, and it's going to be prepared exactly the same way, right? That level of certainty is reassuring. And at the same time, Starbucks provides a great amount of variety. They're continually introducing new things to their menu. They're giving us the opportunity to try something new. They have a wide selection of things available beyond just coffee in the store, and that continues to evolve over time. Now, the reason I want to bring up these things to you is because as you're building rapport, you're going to get to be very good at understanding which of the 6 human needs you're really helping someone fulfill, right? Which need are you feeding as you're making an effort to build rapport? We'll go into that a bit more later. So next up in our human needs, we're going to talk about significance and love and connection. So significance, right? We want, in fact, we need as individuals to be recognized for being who we are, for being unique and special. And you can feed someone's need for significance simply by calling them by their name, right? Sometimes you could do it by recognizing them for an accomplishment. something about them physically, maybe the way they dress, maybe they're a bodybuilder, they've worked really hard on, becoming super large and fit. Those are things that when you recognize them for that, it feeds their need for significance. And significance, of course, is very connected to the need that we all have for love and connection, right? None of us wants to just go through our lives alone. As a species, right? As history has taught us time and time again, we're stronger together than we are alone. And this sense of love and connection is fulfilled for us when we do things like join clubs and churches, and we participate in a shared activity. Maybe we run marathons, not me, maybe triathlons, right? I like to play guitar, so when I get around with my buddies and I play guitar, that's really fun. I'm an entrepreneur. I love to build companies. I find it really exciting. So when I can share and connect with those other entrepreneurs, I really feel a sense of belonging, a sense of connection to those other people. So these first 4 needs that we're speaking about, they're all personality needs. Okay, the next group that we're talking about are things that are spirit needs. Now, we don't often pay attention to these final 2 until we've reasonably fed these first 4 needs. So let's take a look at those final 2. They are growth and contribution, right? Because once you've got to a point where your needs for certainty, variety, significance, love, and connection are met, and met consistently, well, that's not enough, right? We need to grow as people. We always need to be growing. It's something that is an innate quality of who we are as human beings. And one of the strongest connectors to that sense of growth is being able to help others grow. And we do that through contribution. So let's acknowledge this for a moment. Right now, as I'm sharing with you what I've been thinking about and working on for years, I'm actually feeding all of my 6 human needs, right? Certainty. I knew when this webinar was happening, right? I knew how long it would last for. And at the same time, there's also variety. I didn't know that I would forget to push the record button earlier, right? I don't know what sort of questions are going to be asked as a result of sharing this. I don't know who among you is going to become a close friend of mine, who will become a client of mine. All of these things are exciting for me to figure out, and so my need for variety is fulfilled there. As is my sense of significance. You know, it's pretty flattering to have 1,200 people register to hear what I have to say on the topic of rapport. That makes me feel really good. So thank you. Thank you for helping me to feel really good about that. Love and connection. You know, as I look through the list of people who've registered for this event, some of them people who logged in earlier today, like Ron Armstrong, Daryl Golem, Gordy. There's so many people that I have had an opportunity to get to know through this mission I have called Happy Grasshopper, and I'm really sincerely grateful for that. So thank you for also contributing to my sense of love and connection. And finally, growth and contribution. This is a major step, right? Writing a book is not a small undertaking. It takes guts, right? It takes discipline. You've got to sit down and get it done over long periods of time, often alone, often with that inner voice telling you, oh, that you're not good enough. Oh, what you have to offer isn't the best. Oh, they may have heard this before, right? So you've got to be brave. You've got to decide that you're willing to put yourself out there, and in doing so, you grow. I've had that experience, and again, I feel really honored to be sharing this with you because my highest value, my highest state of being is one of contribution. And this goes right back to my childhood. You know, every time we moved and I was that scared new kid who wasn't eating enough, right, whose parents were drunk, I had a survival mechanism that kicked in that changed my life. I would somehow make one really good friend in each city that we moved to. And I don't know how this happened. I'm just incredibly grateful that it did. These kids seem to always have parents who would, you know, open their homes to me, who would let me spend the night, several nights a week. Marcy Mizell in St. Petersburg, Kevin her son was my best friend my freshman year of high school, and when she was out shopping for school clothes for Kevin, well, she managed to find a way to buy school clothes for me too. So many tremendous people have done what they weren't required to do to make a positive impact in my life, that I really feel like the only way I can ever approach paying that back is to pour into you, the viewer of this, the reader of the book, everything that I've learned. So let's go a little deeper on the topic of rapport. There's this artist. Her name is Marina Abramovich, and Marina is just an incredible person when it comes to being able to build rapport non-verbally. She's an artist, and she had an exhibit at MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and it was called, as you may have guessed, The Artist is Present. So here's what happened. She would sit there in a chair, and people would line up, and they would wait hours and hours for a chance to just simply sit down across from her. It was entirely nonverbal, and yet there was a very real, measurable connection that was made between these two people. Think about that, right? So many times we're struggling to think what it is that we need to say, when often we need to slow down and simply be. Simply being is a rare commodity today. And when you can simply be in the presence of someone you're trying to build rapport with, you can make a monumental impact. Marina's a great example of that, and her work was very interesting to the scientific community. So they asked her if she would participate in a study, and here's what happened. She went into the lab. She wore an EEG device on her skull, or her scalp, and so did this lady seated across from her. And they were able to image the brain waves, the connections that were being made between these people, just simply by being open and prepared and willing to allow that connection to exist. So think about that. I mean, how powerful is that? The older I get, the more I appreciate for how much we're learning about the value of our thinking. And there's no better example of that as you're steeling yourself to go out there and start building rapport with strangers, right? Is that something you need to be brave about? Yeah, absolutely. Is that something where you may have to overcome a fear of how someone might respond, right? If someone rejecting you? Is it easy to go knock on the doors? Is it easy to pick up the phone and cold call? It's not. It's not. It's certainly not. And yet it can be tremendously satisfying, sincerely satisfying. I'm not talking about the monetary output. I'm talking about the personal input that you gain, that sense of connection that you can feel with people when you're really in tune and hitting here on all cylinders. So let's take a closer look at the mindset that's necessary to really do this. We're going to break down mindset from the perspective of as you go into this conversation, I want you to divorce your mind of any sales agenda, right? Your agenda should just be to have fun. How can you get to know this person in a way that's fun, right? And when I talk about fun, I mean fun for you. I'm not asking you to go out there and be a dancing, juggling clown or comedian or whatever. You're not trying to entertain them. You're trying to simply be in a state that allows you to have fun with people, right? Presumably, if you work in the sales profession, you have it within your personality to enjoy the company of other people, right? So this is something I really want you to focus on. So it's simple, right? It's two things. Your agenda is to have fun, and you simply need to be curious about other people. It's that simple. So let's take a little closer look here at the way when we approach people, the different tools we have to do this. Now, many of you will know that the majority of communication between two people is nonverbal, 55% according to this chart that I found on the internet. Vocal elements account for 38%, and of course words make up the balance at 7%. So consider that, right? It's not what you say, it's literally how you say it. Now, does that mean some words have no more value over others? Well, of course not. Of course, there are more valuable ways, more valuable words to choose to start a conversation with someone, and we'll teach you those. When it comes to the nonverbal means of communication, we're talking about gestures and posture and your facial expressions. So let me give you an example of that. Webcam is on, you can see me, so I'm just gonna, kind of crouch down here. Hi, I'm Dan. Are you excited to be at my webinar? Probably not, right? I can't come here and deliver from that perspective. I've got to come here, I've got to be bold and confident and calm and confident and strong and happy. I have to be comfortable in my own self in order to make you comfortable, right? A lot of what we do in building rapport is create a safe space where other people can be comfortable, right? So let's talk about these vocal elements. We've got pitch, tone, rate, volume, intonation, rhythm. These are pretty straightforward when you think about it. Your pitch, right? Are you speaking in a way that people can really understand what it is you're saying, right? Are you using vocal variety to your advantage or to your detriment? I'll give you an example. Any sentence that you can think of, if you end on a higher pitch, is going to sound like a question. Any question or any statement you can think of where you end on a lower pitch is going to sound like a command. So, think about that when you're having conversations with people. I'll just read this, right? The Magic of Instant Rapport. That's a book title. Now, if I say The Magic of Instant Rapport, you see how my voice goes up at the end? That becomes a question to you. Whereas if I say The Magic of Instant Rapport, where I get deeper at the end, that's a statement. It's stronger. So when you're trying to engage with people and you're asking them questions and you're trying to build rapport, you need to be sure that the questions you're asking sound like questions and not like bold commands or statements. So as you're approaching people and you're starting to have these conversations, you need to pay a lot of attention to the majority of your communication, which is nonverbal. And there's really no better way to express this than to talk about your smile, okay? It's a simple thing. If you walk into a place and you're smiling and you're friendly, you're certainly a lot more approachable than if you walk in and you're not. But can you tell the difference between two types of smiles, right? And they both look like smiles, yet one is true and sincere and the other one is not so much. This smile on the right is called a Duchenne smile. And when we have a Duchenne smile, it's more than just our lips smiling. It's our whole face that gets involved, right? The lines here show up. We get our eyes involved in the smile. That's when you really know that someone is being sincere with you. This smile on the left, where it's just the mouth that's smiling, well, that's what we call a Pan Am smile, a customer service smile. Someone has a job where they have to deal with the public and they've been told many, many times that they have to smile and be nice. So the only thing on their face that's smiling is their mouth. Everything else is probably wishing they were somewhere else. And I've enlisted the lovely Julia Roberts to demonstrate that for us. So take a look at these two smiles, right? Here she's just smiling. Her eyes might be somewhere else doing something different, or maybe she's had a tremendous amount of Botox. We don't know. And here in this picture, she looks fully engaged, like you're catching her mid-conversation and she's just delighted to be engaged with someone. That's what your face needs to look like when you're building rapport with someone, right? Now, of course, it's got to be in context of the conversation. You can't just walk up to someone and be smiling all over the place without reason. However, you're going to take the conversation to a place where this type of face is absolutely the face that you should be showing. So let's dig in to the approaches I'm going to teach you that allow you to make these types of faces. I call these the 5 approaches. They are assume familiarity, shared observation, recognition, asking for help, and then confirming understanding. So those of you who are attending this because of an email I sent, you may have received a message about my visit to a Mazda dealership. There's a young sales rep there named Derek, and he just gave a perfect demonstration of the assumed familiarity rapport build. So what I did was, of course, I did some research online. I knew practically everything about this beautiful little car called the Mazda Miata RF. I've always had a thing for these tiny little cars. Anyway, I think this one's especially cool because the roof pops up and folds down underneath this rear section here. So RF stands for retractable fastback. And I just think it's neat. I've seen them online. I wanted to go see one in person. So I pull into the dealership. I park my car. I don't walk into the building to meet anyone because they have the car I want to look at. So I just walk over to it. Now think of what most people do at a car dealership. You know, someone walks right up and says, can I help you with anything? You know, and the answer to that is always no, and that question makes me defensive. So Derek was smart. He didn't do that. He came alongside with me, and he was able to be just another guy admiring this beautiful car that Mazda made. And his opening line is, "It's gorgeous, isn't it?" Well, what am I going to say to that? You know, of course I'm going to say it's gorgeous. That's just a beautiful car. Now, it's not really practical, it's too small, there's all sorts of other things that might mean this is a car you would personally never drive. And that is precisely why the assumed familiarity rapport build can be very dangerous, right? Now, what if he walked up to me and assumed that I thought the car was gorgeous, and really what I was thinking was, my God, that's a little death trap. I could never drive that car. I probably wouldn't survive. You know, the conversation is shut down. It goes nowhere. So I want you to use a lot of caution when you're using the assumed familiarity approach. The word assume is in the title after all, and I think we all know what happens to people who assume, right? We run a risk there for sure. Now the next approach is called the shared observation. And I love this one because it's the sort of thing that puts you on the same side as whoever it is that you're approaching with this. So, you know, here on the slide, I grabbed a picture of, I live in Central Florida. We have skies like this every afternoon in the summer. And so we all know what's coming, right? It's going to rain. So if I happen to be near someone and I want to strike up a conversation with them, I can just go, wow, it's going to rain. And they're going to say, yep, here it comes. And that's going to be our conversation starter. Now, I can go in all sorts of different directions after we've established some sort of communication there, but we've got to start somewhere. So the first step in building rapport is having that initial opener, that initial approach that allows you to take the conversation further. So I want you to think through where you might go next in this situation. You know, you might look at this person, and maybe like in my area, for example, we have a lot of tourists and they might not know. So I might offer them some advice about, you know, where to go or what to do. And like they could feel, for example, that their whole afternoon is ruined now, right? It's just going to rain. And I can say, you know, that's going to last probably about 10 minutes and then it's going to go back to being a beautiful sky. Because that's kind of our weather pattern here. That's a pretty regular occurrence. So let's move into the next approach. And I love this one. It's called recognition. And you know, here's a picture of me and Barbara Corcoran, and I'm sure everyone viewing this recording has seen Shark Tank or is at least aware of it. I met Barbara a couple of years ago at a real estate event, and she was delightful. She was so much fun. On stage she was raunchy and just totally uninhibited, and then personally during the meet and greet, handshake, smile, picture stuff, she was just awesome. So we had a delightful little exchange there, and you know, when I can say to someone like Barbara, oh my God, you're Barbara Corcoran, well, she hears that a lot, right? And it never stops feeling good. So if you're meeting someone who you recognize for something, maybe they're famous like Barbara is, or maybe there's someone who's accomplished in their field, right? Maybe you're calling on their business and they have just a tremendous business, right? Maybe their offices are just gorgeous. Maybe you're a real estate agent and you're going to their home and it's just spectacular, right? Maybe it's a less spectacular home, but they've done a really great job caring for a window garden right near the front door. When you can open the conversation by recognizing something that they've invested themselves in, that goes a long way, right? Because it's feeding that human need that we have for significance. And when you're deploying the recognition approach, I want you to understand the "oh my God, you're Barbara Corcoran" is just one of many, many, many ways to start that conversation. It's as simple as observing something that is unique or special or that they care about within themselves and commenting about it in a way that's non-threatening and also not common. So think about this, ladies. Are you with me? Right? If you've worked hard to put on a great outfit and maybe you're going out for the evening, some recognition that you might get for that is very welcome, and some is very offensive, right? So we need to walk a curious line here. I used the example of the bodybuilder earlier. They've worked hard on their physique. If you call attention to it in a positive way, it's almost always going to go well. So you just want to use your sensory acuity here, right? You want to, again, always keep in mind building rapport is a dance, right? It's a dance. So there's a lot of give and take that happens, and you'll need to respond on the fly. So recognition works because it causes the person you're building rapport with to feel valued. Very, very important. Now, the next approach is called asking for help. Sometimes I call this the ask. And it's personally my favorite because, what's my highest value, right? It's contribution. I love when people approach me and ask for help. And on the occasion that I get to ask people for help, it usually makes them feel very good, right? So, there's all sorts of people I interact with who I get to ask for help. Don't have the impression that because I've started a company and I've owned a few and I've had some what people consider success, it doesn't mean I don't need and require the help of people all the time. Earlier today, I was texting with my buddy Seth Price over at Playster. He's just launched a new book called Road to Recognition. And, here he is seeing that this webinar is happening today, and he's reaching out to offer me help in this whole book launch process. So, just tremendous of him to do that. Now, when you're out and about and you see someone that you want to have a conversation with, finding something to ask them for help with is a great opener. It's as simple as, "Excuse me, do you have a moment?" "Awesome. I was really hoping you could help me," blah, 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 whatever it might be. And this works in almost every situation. Let's say you're a real estate agent and you're out door knocking in a neighborhood. Well, rather than be like, "Hi, I'm Dan Stewart from Dan Stewart Real Estate, and I'm here to help you sell your home." Whoa, that's a lot, right, to come out of the gate. It would be a lot more effective to ask them for help. So it's, knock, knock, knock. "Hey, excuse me, do you have a moment? I'm so glad that you do. I really need some help. I'm a real estate agent, and I have some clients who really want to live in this neighborhood. Unfortunately, they don't love anything that's currently on the market. So I just thought I'd come and ask some people who live here if they know anyone who might be ready to sell." Wow, that's a whole lot different, isn't it? Right? And it's a whole lot easier, too. It's a whole lot easier because people are going to respond to that request for help. And I have a friend here in Tampa who used that exact approach to list 12 homes in 1 month just from door knocking. So get out there and do it, people. Asking for help is a great conversation starter, and it always allows you to pivot to more questions. The reason this approach is so effective, again, is because we understand as human beings we're much stronger together than we are as individuals. Now, the next one we're going to take a look at is called confirming understanding. And, think about this, confirming understanding. It's really very straightforward. You seem like the kind of person who, fill in the blank. Is that right? So let's imagine we're back on that rainy day, and we see someone and we look at the sky and we go, "Wow, looks like it's going to rain." And they go, "Yeah, sure is." And you notice they have an umbrella. You can say, oh, well, you seem like the kind of person who's prepared for anything. That's great. And that's going to be a compliment for them that's going to keep that conversation going. So I love this little meme here. This poor girl, she's featured on the internet in a meme as being crazy girlfriend. Well, I'm here to tell you that most all of us are crazy girlfriend today. We are in a culture that demands our attention all the time, and very rarely do we feel like people are actually paying attention to us. So every time that you're building rapport with someone, when you get really good at giving them your full focused attention, wow, you are feeding that human need that they have so effectively. So, rather than have that conversation with someone where you're trying to do two other things, or you're just looking at your phone and making an aside comment, right? Put the phone in your pocket and have the conversation. Really listen to what they're saying. Use all your sensory acuity so that you know where to take that dance of a conversation in the next direction. That's where the magic happens. And of course, when you're nimble, right, like a boxer, you're listening to feedback, you're watching things from all different directions, you're able to move with the music and keep that conversation going. So let's put all these different elements together, right? We've got three main components. We've got your mindset, we've got practice and play, and then, yes, class, we have some homework. So we're going to talk about that a bit too. So mindset. Again, it's so important for you to go in to the rapport build with this agenda of fun. You're fun, right? You're not a dancing clown. You're not a monkey on a leash. This should be fun for you. If you can enjoy the process of building rapport, isn't it obvious that you'll naturally reach out and have many more conversations? Of course it is. Now, second part of the mindset is to be very curious about people, right? It's not about you when you're building rapport. That's an agenda thing, right? If it's a sales agenda, it's, ooh, let me just get them talking and then I'll tell them all about me. No, resist that urge. Instead, make it all about them. See how deep you can go. See how far down this well you can take the conversation. And folks, I tell you, there are some amazing things that can happen as a result of this. I promised you in my email that I'd tell you a story about where this has made an impact in my life. So now's the time for that. Several years ago, a company that I owned was on Inc. magazine's list of the 500 fastest growing companies in America. It was our fourth year on the list, and we went to Washington, D.C. for the big gala and awards banquet and the dinner and so on and so forth. Great event, always enjoy going to that event. And I want you to picture the scene, right? So it's the last night of a multi-day event. We're all wearing tuxedos and gowns, and everybody's just gorgeous, and we've been told all week how great we are, and then thousands of us assemble in a room, and we get called up one by one to get recognition in front of the whole group for how our company ranks. So picture hundreds of banquet tables, each of them seating 10. Now, I go and I sit at one banquet table, and a few minutes later a couple walks up and they asked if seats were taken. I said, well, no, and they joined us and sat down. And we had a chance to have a little conversation before the whole event cranked up. And rather than start out with, hey, I'm Dan, how are you doing, which is pretty throwaway, I used the shared observation rapport build. And I just looked around and I said, wow, this is pretty amazing, isn't it? And they said, yeah, it really is. And so right from the start, we were on the same wavelength there because we were having a shared experience together rather than just a, hey, I'm Dan, how you doing, right? Do you see the difference? Monumental difference. So again, next step is to be curious. Let's learn about them. Now, I figure if you're at an event like this, I figured they had been asked the same question I had been asked all week long, which is, so what's your ranking? Oh, yeah, what kind of business is that? Oh, yeah, okay. And and then you're on to the next conversation. Well, that's boring. I didn't want to do that. So I just started asking them questions about some other things, right? It's like, is this your first time here to this event? Oh, it's so good. Yeah, oh, it's your first time. Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, so what part of the country are you from? Oh, you're from Bel Air Beach. Well, such a small world. I lived at the time in Safety Harbor. So, you know, we had these little connections here and there, and at one point I learned that the wife, her name was Carrie, she was a commercial airline pilot. And I thought, well, that's just fascinating. You know, I had an uncle who was a jet pilot in the Air Force, and you know, I've always wanted to learn to fly. I just haven't got around to it yet. So we started having that conversation. She had a bunch of great stories, and you know, we listened to those stories. And then the conversation took a little bit of a shift. I said, you know, I had a client once years ago who owned a private jet, and he did something amazing for my staff. Unfortunately, I couldn't do this because I had appointments all day. But he took most of my staff into his private jet, and they did something called a performance takeoff, and everybody just raved about it, but I'm not sure I really understand what that is. And so she told me all about what a performance takeoff is and how you shouldn't really be doing a performance takeoff anywhere. It's not something the FAA loves, and you know, we talked about that. And then within 5 minutes of meeting these people, just these little bits of exchanges, she turns to her husband and whispers in his ear, and you know, he nods his head, and then he says, hey, you know what, since we live so close together, why don't you ride home with us on our private jet? And I was like, oh my gosh, that is just tremendous. Well, I would be honored. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, you know, if you don't think that building rapport can be incredibly powerful, if you don't have a sales agenda, I am here to tell you that is an incorrect assumption on your part. It often leads to the greatest payoff when you go into it without that agenda. That's why that's such a critical step for you. So always make fun your agenda and simply be curious. Now, I did learn later that Dallin Larson started a company called Monavi, which was and probably is a huge MLM, which I had never been involved with and have never been involved with. I just thought it was, you know, really interesting. So they were #1 on the list that year, and you know, it was a nice special memory for me to have that experience of flying home. So let's get into some of the next steps here. We're going to talk about practice and play. Okay, this is where your homework starts, right? Practice and play. I want you to go into this with the intention of simply making someone's day. It's really easy to do this in today's world. We have so many service workers all over the place, the folks at the laundromat, the people who check you in at the salon, right? Anyone who works on your car, anyone working in a department store. Most people working in restaurants, they're just in this rut. They're in the same monotonous thing over and over and over again. So if you can engage with one of these people and break that pattern and get them out of the rut, you're making their day by doing that. And that is of tremendous value to you, because when you do that, your internal confidence is going to rise. You're going to not hesitate when it's time to approach someone at that dinner party you've been invited to where you're feeling a little intimidated about all these people. You know, we see that a lot in our careers. We really hope for an opportunity, and then sometimes it arrives, and maybe we don't have the guts to jump in with both feet. Well, that's because we haven't done the work of building the muscle. This is where it starts. Just simply make someone's day. Just make a comment to someone. Hey, you know what? I really appreciate your efficiency. I've been standing in line here for 10 minutes, and you have done an amazing job with all these people, so I just think you should know that. Wow, what kind of impact is that going to have for that person? It's going to make a big difference in their day. A great way to exercise this is to call customer service anywhere, right? These are people who answer hundreds of phone calls a day, or they receive hundreds of inbound calls, and it's people who want to do things like cancel their cable subscription or change their billing address or whatever it is. You know, it's a banking error, and it's the 600th time they've had to answer this question. Those are prime candidates for breaking their patterns and making their day. And you know, this connects me to that story I promised you about the free kitchen that I received from Home Depot. So way back in 1998, my wife and I bought our first home. And I want you to picture this, right? The home was built in 1938, and it had been abandoned for 8 years before we bought it. So to say our first home was a fixer-upper is a real understatement. we had to rewire, replumb, and install central heat and air before we could even move into the home. And so it was a couple of years later before we got to the point where we were ready to remodel the kitchen. And I can't tell you how good it felt to go to Home Depot and to sit down with a kitchen designer and to pick out exactly what we wanted and to know that we could afford it. That was like, wow, just, so great to be able to do that. And so, we wait a few weeks for the cabinets to be built, and then I get a call from my wife one day, and she says, Dan, they brought the cabinets. I'm not sure they're the ones we ordered. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And so I get home, and sure enough, they're not the right cabinets. So, I have to call Home Depot. And rather than make that call from a point of anger, how long we've been waiting for these things? You can't even get the order of the cabinets right. What's the matter with you people? I didn't do that at all. I heard the person's name, because they always answer. Sometimes they're like, this is operator 4625. How can I help you? And you're like, operator 4625? That's an interesting name. And usually, there's some kind of a chuckle there. A lot of places will give out their first name. Most won't give out their last name. Just take a note of that, right? Be sensory. Keep your sensory acuity really high. Capture what that name is, and then use it right back at them. Sarah, I'm so glad that you picked up. I'm so glad to talk with you. I really need some help. Several weeks ago we ordered kitchen cabinets, and they've just installed some cabinets that unfortunately are not the ones that we ordered. Can you help me with that? Right? So I'm asking for help. I'm the one guy who hasn't been a real pain in the butt to that person that day. And in this case, I'll cut a long story short. It was weeks and weeks and weeks. They brought out the wrong cabinets again. We ordered it in the summer, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's passed, and we still didn't have a kitchen. So, living in our house with 2 kids and no kitchen was not easy through the holidays. And through it all, I just kept great notes. I took down people's names, and at one point, I finally got escalated to someone who had some authority. And at this point, they had installed the cabinets, the actual ones that we ordered. However, there were some workmanship and craftsmanship issues. We had some, door fronts that were a little wobbly. He misdrilled a couple of places where doorknobs go on the cabinet doors. And I just calmly explained these things, and then I calmly explained the history, and I asked her if she could see the history on the account. She said she could, and she just, waved her magic wand, and she said, Mr. Stewart, I really am sorry that this has been your experience with us. I really don't see anything we can do to make this up other than to not bill you for your kitchen. We paid for it on American Express, and we had stopped the charges when we had all these issues, and then they just made that go away. That was just wonderful. It was totally unexpected. And then they took it a step further by offering us a discount on the appliances. So, I couldn't be more thrilled, and here I am all these years later, happy to share the experience I had with Home Depot. Yes, they screwed up, but more importantly, they made it right. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Let's just make them right. So some great ways you can get out there and practice and play. Go sit at a lunch counter. I have one across the street here in Safety Harbor. It's a restaurant called The Paradise, and picture your 1950s soda fountain diner kind of place, and I'll go sit there on one of the stools at the counter and just chat with whoever happens to sit down. And of course I'll notice, right, this is a tourist town. Are they here on vacation? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes it's really easy to tell. If they're dressed like they're, taking a lunch break from work, I can say, well, you're either a really well-dressed tourist or you work somewhere in the area. And, they'll comment, and off we'll go. And I'll just want to play and see where that conversation goes with no agenda. And more often than not, those people are going to turn around and say, I really enjoyed the chat. So, what is it you do? And then, of course, there's an opportunity to tell them. One of my key tips here is to not go in with an agenda, and that means you can't be first to talk about what you do for a living, right? Make that commitment to me. Get so good at building rapport that they ask you, right? That's permission. That's them saying to themselves internally, this is someone I'd love to do business with. I wonder what it is they do, right? That's such a much better place to start your relationship than having them wonder or having them realize that the whole reason you started a conversation with them was so you could tell them what you do for a living. Huge difference. Huge difference. Another great place to do this is in line. In my town, Starbucks always has a line. So if I want to practice this, I can walk down there any time, day or night, and I'm likely going to have some people in line, and that gives me an opportunity to have a shared experience chat, right? Or I can ask for help, or I can use the significance approach, right? I've got all of those different options available to me. So here's your homework. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to practice every single day. This is something that's a muscle. You've got to work your muscle. You've got to keep that muscle in shape. So step one, we're starting really easy. Okay, there's daily practice, and it's just 2 new conversations a day with absolutely no agenda other than for you to have fun having these conversations. So I know you can do that, and I know that you're going to feel a lift in confidence when you do. So that's your first assignment. Next thing that I want you to do is keep me in the loop about your progress. I want to hear about your discoveries as you're going through this. I've already confessed to you that I'm recording this well after the 3 o'clock when the webinar actually took place. That's okay. The thing that I want to communicate with you is that at the end of the webinar, I had dozens of emails in my inbox from people sharing with me what they learned, what they really appreciated, the places where they want me to go a little bit deeper. And so I'm going to ask you for some help right now. I would very much like to know, where did I do well? Where do I need to improve? And what is the thing that you're really thinking about as this webinar wraps up? Our book has not gone, my book has not gone to press yet, so I want to make sure that I can take this into consideration, and if we make any adjustments there, I'd really prefer to make them with your guidance. So that's what I've got here, folks. I, again, really want to express my gratitude for your being here with me today, for your taking the time to view this recording. I am a real guy, right? Dan@happygrasshopper.com. When you reach out to me there, you can count on a reply. The reply will come from me. Now, one last thing before we go. This has not been a sales pitch for Happy Grasshopper. That was not my intention in hosting this webinar for you today. That said, during the first session, I had several people reaching out who wanted information about that. So if that's you, if you want to know more about what we do, just email me, and I'll be more than happy to either help you personally or to connect you to the right person on my staff who can. All right? So thank you very much for attending today, and I really hope that this has been valuable for you. So here's my Duchenne smile saying bye. Have a great evening. Take care.